Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and any other gender-fluid individuals that have decided to join us today for another thrilling edition of Tim and Tom's Film Nights. I can smell the popcorn already, or wait, is that just Thomas Cologne? Anyway, today we're discussing Disney's Snow White, or should I say, Snow White 2025 film. Now, before we dive into the deep end of the cinematic pool, let me welcome my dearest friend and co-host for this magical journey through the world of reimagined fairy tales, Thomas.
Timothy, old chap, it's always a pleasure to be here with you even when we disagree on everything. Well, almost everything. I mean, who doesn't love a good Disney remake?
Let me guess. You loved this one, didn't you?
Well, I wouldn't say love just yet. But it was interesting, I suppose.
Interesting. That can mean anything from mind-blowingly amazing to the worst film ever made. So, Tom, what did you think of a Snow White 2025 film?
Well, Timothy, I must admit that the movie did have its moments, but overall it fell short for me. I mean, don't get me wrong. Gal Gadot is an absolute stunner as the evil queen, and she did a fantastic job portraying the complexities of her character. However, where the film really lost me was in its attempt to modernize a classic tale.
Thomas, you always hanker after the old ways. Can't you appreciate a fresh take on an old story? Besides, the evil queen is supposed to be attractive, isn't she? It's part of her charm, or rather, her evil scheme.
I agree that the evil queen should be alluring, but this version leaned too heavily on sexualization for me. And don't get me started on the new song, Snow White and the Seven Twerking Dwarfs. It just didn't fit with the original's charm.
No, Thomas, we've had this discussion before. Music evolves over time, and what was considered appropriate in 1937 wouldn't fly today. Besides, the movie did feature a beautifully crafted ballad called Once Upon a Time in hip-hop that perfectly captured the modernized fairy tale vibe.
I'll give you that one, Timmy. But overall, Snow White 2025 film felt more like a Vegas burlesque show than a Disney remake. It had its moments of glitz and glamour, but it lacked the heart and innocence that made the original so special.
Well, I guess we'll have to agree to disagree on this one, Thomas. For me, director Mark Webb did an incredible job updating a classic while staying true to its core message of love triumphing over hatred, and Rachel Zegler was simply mesmerizing as Snow White, exuding both vulnerability and strength.
All right. I'll give you that. The CGI was top-notch. Especially during the iconic scene where Snow White kisses the sleeping beast, waking him up with a passionate smooch. But overall, Snow White 2025 film felt more like an over-the-top Disney parody than a genuine remake.
Well, my dearest Tom, I suppose we'll just have to agree to disagree on this one. As it seems, our opinions are as divergent as the colors of the rainbow on a sunny day in the middle of winter in London. But that's what makes life and film discussions like ours so interesting, isn't it?
Well, Timothy, I must admit that there was one behind-the-scenes tidbit about Snow White 2025 film's production that caught my attention. It turns out that the iconic poisoned apple scene in Disney's original 1937 Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs took a rather unique turn in this modernized adaptation. Instead of using an actual apple, the team opted for a delicious-looking cupcake baked by none other than Gal Gadot herself. She was so into her character that she insisted on bringing in her own recipe, revealed one of the crew members who wished to remain anonymous. We had no idea what she put in those cupcakes, but everyone on set couldn't resist them, including me. Unfortunately, this creative twist led to a slight hiccup during filming. The CG team had a field day trying to digitally insert the poisonous frosting later, chuckled another crew member who also wished to remain anonymous. It was like, watching an animated cartoon come to life. Despite the challenges, director Mark Webb praised Gadot's dedication and creativity. Gail truly embraced her role as the evil queen, he said in a recent interview. Her cupcakes were a masterpiece, both visually and, well, let's just say they had some unexpected effects on our cast and crew.
I see you couldn't resist sneaking in a little hint about the behind-the-scenes drama, Tom. But seriously, though, that does sound quite interesting. I always admire when actors and actresses go above and beyond to immerse themselves into their characters. And who could resist a cupcake crafted by the hands of Gal Gadot herself? Well, Thomas, as we've established, we both have our opinions on Snow White 2025 film. But let's take a moment to step back and talk about the original 1937 Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. What was it about that classic Disney animation that still resonates with audiences today?
Well, Timothy, I think part of its timeless appeal lies in the film's simple yet powerful storytelling. Snow White is a tale of good versus evil, innocence triumphing over darkness, and ultimately, the power of love to conquer all. And who doesn't love those charming little dwarfs? They bring a much-needed touch of humor and levity to the otherwise grim tale.
That's true, Thomas. But I think what truly sets Snow White apart is its groundbreaking animation. It was the first feature-length animated film ever made, and you can see the care and attention that went into every frame. The detailed backgrounds, expressive character design, and revolutionary use of color and shadows all contribute to creating a magical world that draws you in.
I remember watching Snow White as a child and being mesmerized by the vibrant colors and intricate patterns in every scene. The animation really did transport me into the story, didn't it? But now, let's fast forward to 2025 and discuss how director Mark Webb and his team tackled the daunting task of remaking a classic.
Well, Thomas, I think they tried to maintain the core elements that made the original so timeless while also modernizing it for a new generation. The updated visuals, score, and costumes all contribute to this modernized yet familiar world. And as for the story itself, while there are some changes, I wouldn't say they strayed too far from the original plot.
I agree, Timothy. But I can't help but compare the two versions side by side. While Snow White 2025 film has its moments of beauty and grandeur, it simply can't match the magic and wonder that is the 1937 animated classic. The new movie feels more like a flashy reimagining rather than a true homage to the original.
Well, Tom, art is subjective, isn't it? Some people prefer the nostalgia of the past while others embrace change and innovation. And besides, we should applaud director Webb and his team for attempting such a difficult task. Remaking a classic is never easy, especially when you have such high expectations to live up to.
I guess you're right, Timothy. There's no denying the effort put into Snow White 2025 film, but sometimes it's best to leave certain things alone. Don't you think? Like a painting that's been perfectly preserved in time. Sometimes it's better to admire from afar rather than tamper with its perfection.
But art is meant to evolve and grow, Tom. Just like us humans, we must adapt to the ever-changing world around us. So while I understand your apprehension towards change, I implore you to give Snow White 2025 film a chance. It's a different interpretation of a beloved tale. And isn't that what art is all about?
All right. I concede. I'll watch the new version with an open mind and, try not to compare it too much to the original. But if they so much as mess with my favorite scene involving the little birds and that damnable Snow White song, well, let's just say there might be some words exchanged.
Oh, dear Tom, you do love your dramatics, don't you? But seriously, I think you'll find that Snow White 2025 film does justice to the original while also carving its own unique path in it. Shall we discuss the casting choices for the new adaptation? Well said, Tom. Well said. And speaking of casting choices, let's talk about Rachel Zegler as Snow White. She definitely brings an ethereal beauty and vulnerability to the role, but I can't help but wonder if she could have brought more depth and nuance to the character. Her performance is charming enough, don't get me wrong, but it feels a bit too, well, fairy tale-ish at times.
I see where you're coming from, Timothy. But then again, this is Snow White we're talking about here. A character who embodies innocence and purity to the utmost degree. Perhaps that's exactly what Director Webb was going for with his casting choice.
I suppose you're right, Tom. And as for Gal Gadot as the evil queen, she certainly oozes seductive charm and malevolence in equal measures. Her performance is captivating to watch, but again, it feels a bit too over the top at times. There's no denying her screen presence, though. She commands attention whenever she's on the screen.
Oh, Gal Gadot was definitely the highlight of Snow White 2025 film for me. Her portrayal of the evil queen is simply mesmerizing. The way she struts and sneers her way through every scene, it's deliciously sinister. I only wish the rest of the cast had more to do besides being awestruck by her presence.
Well, I suppose that was inevitable given the nature of Snow White as a story. But speaking of the supporting cast, what did you think of Armando's performance as the king? He definitely brought some much-needed gravitas and humanity to the role. And as for the seven dwarfs, while they were charming enough, I couldn't help but miss the original voices from 1937.
Ah, yes. Armando was fantastic in his role. He managed to convey both strength and vulnerability with such ease, making us care for the character despite limited screen time. And as for the dwarfs, well, let's just say they did their job of providing comic relief and nothing more. They weren't particularly memorable, but then again, neither were the originals in my opinion.
I suppose you're right, Tom. It's hard to top those classic animated dwarfs from 1937. But overall, Snow White 2025 film has a talented cast that does justice to their respective role. Now let's talk about the visual effects and costumes.
Oh yes, the visual effects in this movie are absolutely breathtaking. Every scene is a feast for the eyes, from the lush forest landscapes to the dazzlingly detailed costume. And speaking of costumes, I must commend the costume design team for their work on Snow White's wardrobe. Each dress she wears is more stunning than the next, perfectly capturing her transformation from a naive princess to a strong heroine.
Indeed, Tom, the attention to detail in the costumes and sets is simply astounding. And as for the visual effects, they seamlessly blend with the live action elements, creating a world that's both familiar yet utterly transporting. It truly immerses you into the story, doesn't it?
I agree, Timothy. Director Webb and his team have done an incredible job of bringing this classic tale to life on the big screen. And despite some minor hiccups along the way, Snow White 2025 film remains a captivating reimagining of a beloved fairy tale.
Well said, Tom. Well said. So in conclusion, while Snow White 2025 film may not surpass the original animated classic, it certainly stands on its own merits as an entertaining and visually stunning adaptation. It pays homage to the source material while also adding its own unique spin on the familiar story.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Timothy. Now, shall we move on to our next topic? Perhaps we could discuss the cultural contribution of Snow White 2025 film and how it reflects upon society today.
Well, Thomas, I think it's worth mentioning that Snow White 2025 film has garnered quite a bit of attention, not only for its stunning visuals and impressive cast, but also for how it tackles timeless themes like love, betrayal, and redemption. By modernizing these classic fairy tale elements, Director Webb and his team have managed to make the story relatable to a new generation of moviegoers who may not be familiar with the original 1937 animated classic.
Absolutely, Timothy. I think one of the most interesting aspects of this remake is how it explores the complexities of good and evil. The film challenges us to question the black and white morality that often permeates fairy tales, instead suggesting that there are shades of gray in even the most seemingly evil characters. This nuanced approach to storytelling allows viewers to empathize with the motivations behind even the villain's actions, which I think is a valuable lesson for our current times.
And let's not forget about the strong female protagonist portrayed by Rachel Zegler as Snow White. Her journey from naive princess to courageous heroine embodies the spirit of empowerment and self-discovery that resonates with audiences, both young and old alike. The film's emphasis on female agency and empowerment is refreshingly progressive for a genre known for its traditional portrayal of women as passive objects of desire or rescue.
Indeed, Timothy, Snow White 2025 film does indeed tackle relevant cultural issues head-on while still maintaining the magic and wonder that's synonymous with fairy tales. It serves as a reminder that even the oldest stories can be reimagined and updated without losing their essential core message of love, hope, and redemption.
Said conclusion, Tom. And speaking of cultural contributions, I believe there's a new art exhibit opening up in town tomorrow featuring works inspired by Snow White 2025 film. Shall we plan on attending the opening gala? It promises to be a night full of glitz and glamour befitting a modern-day fairy tale.
Oh, Timothy, you know I can't resist a good art event. Count me in for the opening gala. Let's just hope we don't end up eating anything that's too colorful, shall we?
Well said, Tom. Snow White 2025 film is a true testament to the enduring power of classic fairy tales. It's not just a rehash of an old story, but rather a thoughtful reimagining that speaks to today's audiences. And let us not forget the stunning visual effects and performances by an incredible cast led by the captivating Rachel Zegler as Snow White and the enigmatic Gal Gadot as the evil queen.
Absolutely, Timothy. Snow White 2025 film is a must-watch for fans of fairy tales and cinema alike. It's a visually stunning journey into the world of magic and wonder that reminds us that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope for redemption and love to be found.
And with that, folks, we've come to the end of another exciting episode of Tim and Tom's Film Nights. Remember to comment, subscribe, and share your own thoughts on Snow White 2025 film with us. And until next time, remember, even in a world filled with darkness, there's always room for a little bit of fairy dust and a lot of love. Good night and pleasant dreams.